Hi everyone, welcome to the Brown History Podcast. My name is Essen and you're listening to episode 39. My guest today is world-renowned filmmaker Mira Nair. Her films include The Namesake, Monsoon Wedding, Mississippi Masala, and Salam Bombay, for which she was nominated for an Oscar. This is a special episode because this is the first time where I didn't use Zoom and actually got to sit down with Mira Nair face to face and do this whole recording in person. And this is all thanks to the Toronto Film Festival, so a special shout out to them. And also a special thanks to Nandita Dutta from TIFF, who was very kind and very supportive and totally organized this whole thing. This episode would not have happened without her. This is going to be an awesome episode, so let's get moving. Let's begin. Here we go. Okay, so my first question is, filmmaking takes a lot of guts. It takes a massive amount of self-belief. So many people are dependent on you to lead them, and a lot of people have invested money on you. What made you think that you can do filmmaking? Where did you get the courage and the confidence? And keep in mind that Salam Bombay was no ordinary debut film. It was such a big project and had a big cast, including children who never acted before, and it was filmed in tough locations.
I like to think of filmmaking as a disease. You're either sick with it or you're not. It's not something that you go out, at least, or I went out and chose. I really felt that it chose me finally. But the pursuit is very pointed and focused. My journey started from the love of performance, of feeling intuitively happy on a stage as an actor, and but feeling also limited by how much in acting you have to be at the mercy of other people's visions. Your nose may be too big for this role, or your voice may not be high enough for that role, or whatever. So as an actor, I was very early on aware that I would have no control over my life, even though I loved the practice of the craft. Um, and the other burning question, just from childhood days and just from growing up in India, is that we live cheek by jowl, with those who have and those who have nothing. And why is this? Why is this injustice? What is this? How do we live our lives so intertwined and yet so unfair? And that was the question, whether art could actually disturb this question, or inform this question, or whether it couldn't. And I did think that no matter how much I loved acting, it would not answer that question, which led me to then taking a course in photography, which of course taught me about the sacredness of the making a frame, but yet it was observational as a profession. You looked at the world rather than engaged in the world. But it was the love of the frame that then catapulted me into the pursuit of cinema verite, documentary, the cinema of truth, where I studied with Ricky Leacock and Penny Baker and stuff as an undergraduate at Harvard, where I had the scholarship. And that was the first time I felt that finally here is an art form that encompasses all my loves. My love of people, my love of looking at the world visually, of performance, of this or that. But uh, I could hopefully tell a story. In the first 7 years, it was surrendering and entering the people's worlds that existed, whether it be strippers in a nightclub in Bombay, or whether it be the ward of a geriatric ward of a hospital in Boston. These are different films I made in the course of 7 years before Salam Bombay. So by the time I came to making my first feature film, Salam Bombay, I had already made several documentaries. And documentaries are a lonely, patience striving, painstaking business where often you may or may not have an audience even at the end of that endeavor of making a documentary.
Yeah.
But that's what told me that this is what I am cut out for. The rigor of it, the struggle of it. This was something I believed in and I could do. And it also made me, I call it now, you have to have a heart of a poet and the skin of an elephant. It also gave me that bulldozer quality. If I really want to have something, I have to just pursue it. I have to have the patience, I have to have the humility, and I have to have the respect to enter people's lives in the way that I wanted to enter it, in order to tell a story about them or my version of that story. And it was the desire to get a wider audience for that type of work that led me to make a fiction feature film. I never looked at documentary as a stepping stone to fiction. I did that because I loved it, but it was disheartening in the early 80s to never have an audience for a documentary except in the television, which was
Yeah.
like void of some sort. You never knew what people would think, and you never knew what the reaction was or anything. And that led me to make a film like Salam Bombay, which was a real coming together of all my interests. We put together a workshop of about 100 plus street kids, just like my theater days, and we put together. A film crew, which is again starting out like me, Sandy Sissel, who's the cinematographer of Salam Bombay. It's her first feature as well. And, we put together, of course, initially, very importantly, the story and the screenplay by Sunita Rapurwala and myself. We were best friends at Harvard, and she's from Bombay. And this, we basically followed 4 months of street kids, one gang of rag pickers, and practically lived their lives, and then took their dreams and their stories and our own imaginations and created the screenplay of what became Salam Bombay. So by that time, I was already diseased. I was already clear that this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I do have, there is, I sometimes I call it the foolish confidence, of the Ivy League, where you can just sort of bash on and believe that the worst that can happen is someone will say no to you. But otherwise also, I'm the youngest child I have two older brothers, and I'm the youngest kid and the daughter. And they were the best teachers, my brothers, because I had to always deserve an audience for them. They would otherwise mock me, tease me, and shut me up.
Yeah.
So I was already geared in a world
Yeah.
where pretension had no place, and that I had to sing for my supper in a very real way. Like, if you want to tell a story, you goddamn well be riveting, not just faff around and waste my time. So I came from that type of thickened skin in the best possible sense, perhaps, and also being independent, on my own, both in the theater from the ages of 16, 17, and then coming abroad alone, finding my voice through anonymity, through not knowing, no one's looking out for me, I'm just finding my way in a foreign place, this all gives you courage, gives me, and then of course being in a pretty elite institution like Harvard, it does give you a foolish confidence, that they teach you to that nothing is impossible, that if why don't you ask, Denzel Washington to do this part, even though you're not even a filmmaker or just made one film. The worst that can happen is he'll say no, and these kinds of weird lessons are very important lessons to believe in yourself and to carry on,
Yeah.
so I learned from 7 years of making documentaries, and the loneliness of it, I must say, and the toughness of it. When I lived in India Cabaret, I made a film in '85 with strippers in a nightclub in Bombay. Everyone thought I was a stripper, and it was the best way to be, because I understood then very directly what it felt like, and so anyway, so that these are all, in retrospect, these are ways that encourage that thick-skinned confidence that you must keep on going, and also it very importantly taught me humility, to how to enter people's lives is not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. People have to accept you and actually like you to share their world with you, and all these training is very important for what eventually becomes the kind of feature films that I made, which are really still, I think, even though they are fiction and they follow that form, they are an amalgam of everyday life and its unpredictability and the people of it within a fiction context.
During the filming of Salam Bombay, did you have doubts that this could be something that might not be received well with the audience, that it might suck? And do you still remember the first moment? Did you expect the reaction it got? And do you remember the first time you realized that this could be something great?
The beauty of uh, beginning anything is that you have no expectations. Genuinely. There's a line in the Bhagavad Gita, beware the fruits of action. And beware them, because the results of your action might paralyze you. But the beauty of Salam Bombay was that I had never been to a feature film festival even in my life. Forget about going to Cannes and dreaming of it. I had only been to documentary film festivals. So here I was at the first time in Cannes with Salam Bombay, without any publicity, without any brochures, without any band baja
Wow.
at all, except that it was loved by the organizers of Cannes, and it was scheduled for closing night, which is a big honor. Yes, so when I and at that at that closing night, it was 30 minutes standing ovation, literally by the
30
clock.
minutes.
30
They
minutes.
literally just stand up and clap
You
for 30
stand
minutes.
up, and they really know how to do it.
It must be really awkward for you to just sit there and just
I
wait.
didn't know whether to cry or to laugh or to, and also you couldn't get out of there because no one was moving. You were just standing up and clapping. And so that definitely woke me up into it something. And there's a lovely thing in the film where the chaipa or the tea boy smokes or buys or steals this Ganesh beedi, these
Yeah.
beedis, these little leaf cigarettes. And right after the 30 minutes ovation, there was a young French girl who came to my hand and just gave me 2 Ganesh beedi and said, Mira, this is for you. And I was just like, oh my God.
That's
and,
funny.
And then, I was living, I had no money even for a hotel room at Cannes, and I had rented a room in a pension, in like an Airbnb, like one room in an old lady's home.
Yeah.
And they were, of course, this was 1988. There was no cell phones. There were no phones. I used the landline of that old lady for my catalog, for the where can you find Mira Nair? I had the landline of the phone of the old lady's pension.
Wow.
And when I went back after the premiere and the screening at about 2 in the morning, that phone rang from 2 a.m. till 9 a.m.
Wow.
And I just would scramble to the hallway where the phone was and just pick it up. And by the morning, we had sold the whole world,
Wow.
except the USA, which held out for a bit. But every country in the world was basically buying the film. And all that was the first time. And right up to the Oscars, everything we had was the first time. Publicity, by the way, 9 months of publicity around the whole world that I had to do was also for the first time. So it's a beautiful thing when the first time, because you don't have a model to follow, you don't have any expectations, and then this thing keeps unfolding. It never happened really exactly like that. It did, little versions of that happened with Monsoon Wedding later on, and to some extent with the Namesake and different movies I made. But in that kind of fairy tale of you going there as nobody and then you're emerging as the toast of the town,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen often.
That's a rare fairy tale kind of story.
Yeah, but it's a fairy tale with a lot of grit and brutal,
Of course.
hard work and pain and joy, because as you know, we took the profits of the movie and we immediately began the Salam Balak Trust for Street Kids, which is now a 33-year-old organization, and all of that. So in that sense, it is the beautiful success story, but it doesn't happen often. You can work your whole life. I mean, I'm always working, always making films, but success is elusive. Inspiration sometimes is elusive. And yeah. So, but it's beautiful when it can happen, especially for something that is such a risk. And no one, I mean, everybody thought I was nuts in India. We were shooting on the streets of Kamatipura, the red light area. We were shooting with as much care. We had silks for diffusing light across all these red light area streets. And people thought, where's the movie star? Who are we protecting to make look so good? And there were these 5 street kids. And they were saying, what the hell are you doing? Why do you have to make this look so extraordinary, if it's just street kids? And for me, it was every frame was sacred, and every frame had to be a certain way. But I had firstly, no time to imagine that it could be a success, and secondly, no models to follow.
This is a question from your son Zoran.
Oh,
He wants me to ask you about Nani at Cannes.
oh. Na- Nani is my mom, his grandmom. Um, and Nani and Nanu, my parents, came with me to Salam Bombay at Cannes. And it was the first film festival that they had ever come with me on. And my mom always wore saris and does wear saris. And at that time in France, it was not so often to see an Indian film, hardly ever, in Cannes, and certainly not so many Indians. And after the success of Salam Bombay, she would be walking in the Croisette with her sari on, and in a sari, and people would mob her and say, "Are you with Salam Bombay? Are you And she just would stand up very beautifully and say, "I am the producer of the director." And it became a headline in the Cannes newspapers, a producer of the director. And indeed it's true. My mom has been a major inspiration for me, because she's comes from the streets in the sense that she works as a social worker. She's always been engaged in the life beyond her comfort zone,
Right.
and she taught me early on that no words, action. Of course, I took the word action into a profession, but she's always engaged with those who don't have half as much as she does.
Were your parents very supportive of you working in these kind of dangerous adult areas?
Not at all. They were not supportive of me at all working in dangerous areas. When I chose to live with the strippers in India Cabaret, they disowned me in the sense that they just said to people, "Oh, Mira doesn't, she's not around." She does. They just did not want to. When I started working as a waitress in New York City, and people would come through New York from India and stuff, they would say, "Oh, Mira is no longer living in New York." They had the shame.
Really?
Waitress was the shame.
What
of
about
it.
filmmaking in general?
Filmmaking, that was the beauty, of working in anonymous ways, and I'm talking, and again, 70s, 80s, where people now, every second kid you meet wants to make a film. Then it was highly unusual. And so the best part was I was finding my way on my own, rather than having a whole jhund with me, of my family observing and, dissecting and judging. They didn't do it. I mean, they weren't around, So, yes, they saw me through my Jholewala days, as they call it, which is the sort of the documentary filmmaking days. They didn't have much to say about it, as to they didn't really see those movies, the documentary films I made.
Yeah.
But it was Salam Bombay, which was the first feature film that they came to the film festival, and they saw, what was involved. And after that, my mom became incredibly. My father was proud of me, but my mom became incredibly supportive of me. So while I then got married and had a baby and so on, she always came with me while I was shooting and while I was, doing it. She, as well as my mother and father-in-law, Ammi and Dada, my husband's parents, and this was my caravan. This is why I've never stopped working, is because I had the support of my parents and his parents to actually look after our son Zoran while I was shooting 15 hours a day, wherever it might be. So then they really understood the blood and sweat of movie making. Like, they couldn't believe how hard I had to work and how long the hours were, and the different challenges that would come. Then they really saw it firsthand. But otherwise, people have no idea what it takes to make a film.
No, that's when they gave you the respect you deserved.
Well, they did like the films, very much. So I think the respect came with liking the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody has this fantasy where they're walking down the street and a director comes to them and goes, "You're the perfect, you're the perfect person to be in my movie. You're gonna be the lead actor in my movie. You're gonna go to Hollywood." That director is pretty much you, because there are a lot of movies that you have where you cast these non-actors and you just throw them into these movie sets and you have them play against opposite professional actors. How do you get them to act? And do you take the opposite approach and make them not act? Because some of the roles, the characters are very innocent or underdog. Is that why you cast these non-actors, because you can get that innocence look?
Well, I came from theater and I came from documentary cinema. So there was no way I was going to make a feature film on street kids and cast upper class children who had come out of the fancy boarding schools.
Right.
Because the map of life of a street kid's existence is on his hands and on her face and in her eyes. It's not something you can act or, in a way direct. And that rough and tumble existence of survival is not something that you can get. That's one of the reasons Slumdog Millionaire was not so great for me, because midway these children changed from being actually from the street to being actually from the fancy boarding schools pretending to be the street kids.
Right.
And I didn't believe that, because in the subcontinent, how you speak, how you stand, what your accent is, what your language is, all belies your past and your class and your education. So I like to cast those that come from the story that I'm trying to tell. And in the street kids case, it was fairly obvious that I wanted that on their faces and their hands and their toughness. But other times too, in several of my films, looking backwards, a lot of my films have this amalgam. This is the signature, is to have a lot of so-called non-actors opposite legendary actors. So any film you take, if you take Monsoon Wedding, for instance, half my family is acting in that film in big roles, opposite a Nasiruddin Shah or opposite a Shefali Shah. But sometimes people would drop out, of parts, and I would then have to really look for people on the street, sometimes. Well, do you want me to tell that story? I think I told it yesterday about Kamini Khanna.
Sure.
But if it's a long story.
Why don't you tell me about Sarita Chaudhary and how did you
Yes, I'll tell about her.
How'd you get her to act and to
Yes.
give her the confidence she needs to play against
Yes.
the Denzel Washington?
Yeah. Well, when I was making Mississippi Masala, 1990, I needed Meena. I needed a lead actor, and I had seen this pretty riveting portrait of this wild-looking girl with a mane of hair, stunning, strong face, on a bicycle. And I just loved her look. I loved her fierce intelligence, and I liked also her lack of vanity. She was not about, don't I look pretty, don't I do this, nothing. She said, it's devil may care type of attitude in her face. And I asked to find her. And she had meanwhile done a very interesting spread in a British magazine called Acme, I think, of a 4-page spread as a model, opposite somebody else. And I loved those images of her. Sent these images over to Susie Figgis, who was my casting director, and I said, find this girl, and assuming she was in England. And she was. She was a film student, theory student, not an actor. And this girl was brought in, and I just talked with her and read with her, and she had never thought to be an actor, and but she was, I could just tell, that she really had the Meena quality, and it's about, again, it's that same, the documentary training, making people really feel comfortable, making them be who they are, because you are who you are, perhaps, and then starting the audition process, in the sense of bringing in the screenplay, and the scripts and so on, and just her, she just had it. She had the ability to be herself, and she had actually, again, lived a very strong part of that life of Meena, of somebody who lived between worlds, who looks very different from the white mainstream that she's sitting around, but who holds her own with them, etc., which is Meena, And so I took a chance, and I showed her pictures to Denzel, who really thought they were just fine, and then flew her in to talk and work with me and Denzel, and we did this sort of very laid-back rehearsal, just the three of us. And then it became clearer and clearer. This is definitely Meena, and that's how that happened. But I think for me, it's always having an eye for people. I really look at people. Even now,
Yeah.
I'm looking at people. I'm casting in a sense all the time,
Yeah.
and then taking then working with them, talking to them. I think it's a lot to do also with my cinema verite background of making people like entering their world instead of having them leap into mine. And then secondly, being a trained actor myself before, I just know how not to demand an acting performance, but how to help that person find their way into getting me what I would like.
I don't think people notice enough, but there is a lot of people out there whose lives you've changed and whose careers you've changed. Sarita Chaudhary is an example. You gave Cal Penn his first dramatic role. I think Randeep Hooda made his debut with Monsoon Wedding. You hired Raul Chitala out of engineering, and now he has his movie coming out. And I think Lupita Nyong'o was an intern for you at one point.
Of course.
So you have all these people that you've kind of encouraged.
Irfan Khan, I
yes.
took him out of the basement of National School of Drama, and and even lovely Salman Toor, the great painter. I went to his Pratt student thesis project, when he was graduating from Pratt, and just had to buy this amazing painting of Auntie Ji that I loved, that I still live with. It's in my study, and I love to swallow life. Um, I love to see people who are just have the fire of a certain kind of originality and talent, and who have belief in pursuing that. And yeah, there's several people in acting who have started, with me. Some big stars now. Tilotoma Shom is one of them. She was Alice in Monsoon Wedding. Nana Patekar is one of them. He was the pimp in Salam Bombay. And of course Randeep Hooda, and so many actually.
It's crazy.
It's one of my treasures. Is somebody said that you've started so many people off, and it's one of my things that gives me great happiness. I mean, we are now doing a stage musical of Monsoon Wedding, which I've been developing for almost 12 years, and we're going to open now in November 22. And the person who played 3 years ago when we started casting for it in North America, it's very difficult to find South Asian actors who have that, triple threat of singing, dancing, and acting that Broadway requires. And I with great difficulty found people. And Michael Malayakal, this wonderful, wonderful young man who played the lead, who played the bridegroom in Monsoon Wedding when we opened here in Berkeley, California, is now playing Aladdin as Aladdin on Broadway, for instance, and no one knew how to look at him before, before he was cast in Monsoon. So that is one of my secret joys, is being able to plumb talent when it's there, and bring it to another place.
After Salam Bombay's success, the world is watching you now, and you decide to go and make Mississippi Masala. How did Mississippi Masala come about? Because what is really interesting is that the historical context of the movie is not really well known at all. So to get people to believe in the project must have been really tough, because it's just a hard movie to sell. And if you add to that, I don't think there are any white characters in the movie, and two, the love story is based around two different non-white characters, which I don't think was ever done before that.
Yeah.
And even today, if you were to pitch that movie, I don't think anybody would really be interested in it.
So what's the question?
The question is, why did you choose that movie?
Oh, I see.
After that, I'm sure you were getting all these big studio movies coming in to direct, but you chose this little movie with not so well-known history behind it,
Yeah.
with Africa and Uganda.
Well, after Salam Bombay, I was offered genuinely every film that had children of every color in it. And again, it's I also had every lot of agents, Hollywood agents after me to represent me. And I came from that weird bulldozing place where I didn't require an agent. I thought, I said, why an agent? I know that I'm not going to be here to hustle for jobs. I'm going to be doing my work. And I didn't want to be regarded like as somebody available in the marketplace. Weirdly, and um, but certainly I was pretty clear about the movies on children coming to me, that I didn't want to repeat myself. I'd just done that, and I did not need to do that again. And I was very clear-eyed about how that's what Hollywood, that's what our film industry does, is that you proved yourself on one thing, now make 10 times over. And I kind of had a weird wisdom that life is not long, life is short, and you have to do things that are still a challenge almost every time. And the idea for Mississippi Masala came to me from being a brown kid between black and white at university, and I at Harvard, and I was very much somebody who swung between both communities with ease, and yet saw invisible lines between us all. And so I was looking for a story that I could hang this idea on, the idea being the hierarchy of color, the different ways black, white, and brown, interact and are together. And that's when I started reading, and I read about just on a cerebral level, the Ugandan expulsion in 1972 by Idi Amin of all the Asians who had never left, who had never been to India even, who had lived there for 3 generations, suddenly asked to leave. 90 days they were given. And also there used to be an Indian tabloid called India Abroad, and there was a newspaper in New York which used to write these stories of Indians coming from Uganda and different places who were taking over the dirt poor motels of Mississippi. And I thought, that's just a bizarre trick of history, that to go to the birthplace of civil rights movement in Mississippi, where African Americans are the stronghold and where they have never been to Africa either, and I just cooked that up. It's like, what if there's what if a brown kid falls for a black guy, and what happens? How do you challenge these schisms of color and community through love? Is it possible? And so that was just the cerebral idea. I did not know East Africa. I did not know the South. And then I asked Suni Tharapurwala, again, my dear friend, and we both went on a long journey of social science research, essentially, living in and out of motels over several months, as well as going to East Africa, and, the dream of the place that the Asians had left and still dreamt of. And that, of course, changed my whole life, because that another chapter of my life started after that.
What was the Indian American reaction to Mississippi Masala? Because there's a lot of anti-black
Oh.
racism in the community, especially back then.
Oh, it was extraordinary. I mean, the one of the premises of making Mississippi Masala was holding a mirror to the racism within us all.
Yes.
And the movie does it, I think, very cleverly and funnily as well, through a lot of humor, about how the brown people think of the blacks and vice versa too, and so on. When the film came out, it was a success. It had a really good reception, and it played very strongly in many places. I mean, Indian guys would just like follow me on the subway, and come and challenge me and say to me, "What do you want to do? Huh? You're wanting our daughters to just marry black people?
No way.
You think every black guy is Denzel Washington? Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you
No way.
challenging
That is
the
wild.
status quo?" And then they would say, "I am a doctor in a Porsche. I'm driving a Porsche. Why aren't you making films about people like me?" And I would say, as soon as a doctor in a Porsche becomes interesting, I'll be right there with my camera, and that would not shut them up. They would keep going. So it was a lot of
Wow. Why do you think they took it so
because
personal?
because
Because it's
also,
true?
It is true, exactly, it's true. And it's also, we were still such a unseen minority in American society at that time, So there was this umbrage, like if you must show us, then show us in a quote unquote good light, in Doctor in a Porsche. Don't show us, watching striptease dancers, or don't show us, calling the blacks Kalu and this and that. Don't show us in our
Worse.
real
Yeah,
light.
in real life, yeah.
So
Wow.
there was that pressure too, because there was so little known about us. Is that make it good, make it good, you know.
I think in today's generation, in Western society, a lot of young brown people, when they want to write a story or do something artistic, there's a point where they have to feel like, should I explain myself to my Western audience, or should I just let them figure it out? And I find that in a lot of your movies, you don't really explain a lot of cultural gestures or
Yeah.
actions or things like that. Do you do that on purpose? Like, you don't want to explain anything. Like, for example, Cal Penn shaved his head in the movie The Namesake because of his father's death. It's a really big part in the
Moment.
movie, but you don't explain anything about that, why he's doing it. We all have to figure it out. I know because I have friends in the culture, but someone who has no idea what that is might be a bit confused. So do you on purposely just hope that they're smart enough to figure it out?
You know, I refuse to pander. I refuse to uh, teach you the red dot means X. You know, but at the same time, I don't want to confuse or obfuscate. So it's not like so. And I've walked this tightrope now for 35, 40 years. So it's never to confuse or assume that you know, or to make an in joke. No, it is to tell you other ways that you understand, how this is. So, for instance, when Cal shaved his head, which was a beautiful thing that Suni Tharapurwala actually added to the screenplay. From it was not in the book. Um, how I explained it was when much earlier in the film, in the story, when Ashima's father dies, her brother in the film, um, sh- with a shaved head, in respect to the father having died, calls her up in America and tells her that our father has gone. And it's a hint to the audience that if you're noticing it, that you see that he is bald. And he was a young man, he was only 20 years old. And you know him in the film with head of hair. So now you see that he's got a bald head, and he's talking only about the death of the father. And then later in the film, when he dies, when Ashima's own husband dies, Gogol's father, Kalpen's father dies, that's why we have that, the shaving of the head. And the shaving of the head was accompanied by this rap song that I commissioned for that section, which was a great song that they cooked up about tradition and rules and rituals and atonement. These are the layers of respect that we give our ancestors when they pass. And in using that song, it's a montage sequence of Cal getting his head shaved, and it goes into the little Cal, the young Gogol, looking at his father Irfan shaving his head when his father had died. So these are not all explained in 2+2 kind of way, but it's all of a piece to understand that this is what happens when fathers die. The oldest sons shave their hair out of respect, but also out of a layered tradition that has happened from generations. So that's how I like to do it, using cinema in all its sort of glory, I hope, to make these ideas clear, and even if not fully clear, at least powerful.
There is a lot of music and singing, lots of singing in your movies.
Yeah.
This is a question from Alisetti. He told me he's a big fan of your movie soundtracks. In fact, he was part of the Reluctant Fundamentalist. He feels like there's a music producer inside you somewhere, and he wants to know if you ever considered making an album.
I am a music producer, and I love it most to do. And all my soundtracks are very carefully, not just curated, but also commissioned into actual melodies and bringing things together.
Yeah.
A lot of found music in them as well. A lot of times, movies are inspired by a piece of music for me. The Namesake was inspired almost completely by. Nitin Sawhney had done a beautiful song, the Boatman song, in one of his albums, and I loved it, and I used it in the film, and we wrote, a lot to that song. But Nitin hadn't done any kind of soundtrack like I got him to do with the namesake. It took us weeks together to really cull this extraordinary soundtrack that he did. So yeah, I am a music producer. All my soundtracks are virtually produced by me, and I would love even to work with Ali. Wah. As I did, I made him
You
sit
did.
in that Ritz hotel in Old Delhi and do Dil Jalane Ki Baat, because I just had to have his songs, his voice somewhere. But I am that. I do definitely feel that now. I'm entering
In musical.
a feature film with Pharrell Williams doing music, traversing both the American sound as well as very much an Indian sound. And then, of course, the stage musical that I'm about to do with Monsoon Wedding with Vishal Bhardwaj's music. So what can I say? It's music is like oxygen for me, and I think that it's really a amazing element to bring to cinema if you use it correctly and if you don't overuse it. In fact, silence is much more vital than in order to appreciate music, I think, in cinema. Yeah, if I could make music every year in my life, I would be a very happy person.
You
And
can.
I
I
am.
think you can sing. I think you have.
I'm trying to sing. I am singing, and Ali, in fact, is my teacher.
Yeah.
But I've not been the best student because I do too much else. Riyaz means you have to really surrender to
Yeah.
that rigor of practice.
Yeah. And I think you're doing the musical. I think you have a guru, and you kind of have to be really dedicated.
Yes.
It's not like a Western way of learning music.
No.
You have to be in it. You
Yeah.
have to live, breathe, and eat music.
Yes, and because there's so much to learn, it's impossible to know, enough.
Can we talk about politics a bit?
If you want, she says.
A Suitable Boy encountered
Ah.
some controversy. Some people were angry that you had scenes of a Muslim and a Hindu kissing. With the current political climate in India, is that something you worry about now when you make art? With more Indian politics become more and more of art, with Indian politics becoming more and more of a hindrance to art. Do you still want to make movies about India and make movies set in India?
I think, now more than ever, one has to make films or art about the human condition in the subcontinent because the great plurality that is our strength, the fact that we are a deeply syncretic culture that has come not just between India and Pakistan, but right from Persia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, to Kashmir to India. I mean, it has enriched our culture so deeply, both in its music, in its poetry, in its spiritual thoughts, in every way, in costume, in every way, in language, and that is our strength. And what I find so disheartening and unable to accept, and I will fight against the dying of the light at every moment, is to separate us, is to compartmentalize that this is not us and that is not us. That is exactly what has made this culture of ours so multiple and abundant and strong, and able to withstand also so much struggle through these centuries. So I will always be making that film. I will always be making that kind of art. And but yes, the climate to make it and the voice in which you use to do it is much more threatened today
Yeah.
and much more on the much more dangerous to do. Um, but but we have to find a way.
This is my last question. So I was watching A Suitable Boy,
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't help notice that the environment, it takes place in the 1950s. The environment, the tension, the political climate, the anger between the two religions. If you take that and you look at India today, it's exactly the same thing, and it's pretty depressing to see that nothing's really changed since then. And when African-American author Toni Morrison was 84 years old, someone asked her, do you feel more amused than angry now? And she replied, no, I'm angry all the time. And she uses her writing and her books to kind of react to that. So now I'm going to ask you, how do you feel now?
I think, Vikram Seth, the author of Suitable Boy, was deeply prescient when he wrote Suitable Boy, when he wrote about these seeds of violence and dissension that had created the two countries of India and Pakistan at that time of independence. And that it is true that exactly those seeds that were planted then are blooming ridiculously brightly now, and it is something that I think I've answered this in the previous answer. It is not something that I sleep peacefully at night with. I actually live it in my own family. We have an integrated family, and we have a family that crosses borders between India and East Africa and North America, and we also have a family that is in politics, and questioning the status quo, questioning the injustice of the time. So it's I'm very much akin with Toni Morrison. It's not something that it's easy to forget. It's in fact it fuels me to keep going.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there something you want to talk about or you want to add?
Oh, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think it's been a while. We spent a lot of time together today.
Thank you.
I never think if someone told me that I was going to hang out with Mira Nair and have sushi with her after making my Instagram post, I'd be like, you're crazy. There's no way I'd be sitting in a room with no windows.